Hi everyone, it's Dave from the Alpaca Benro Polaris project. Tonight I'm going to demonstrate the plate solving and various alignment options that we've got new to the Benro Polaris. I think you'll be impressed with what these functions bring. Now Nina supports a whole different suite of plate solving application to help it work out where your mount is pointing in the sky. Our recommendation is to use the ASTAP plate solver. Now, if you've used astronomy.net, you'll be amazed at speed and ease of integration with Nina. It really is great. Now, the driver allows you to integrate the plate solving sync feature with the alignment process of the Benro Polaris. So what that means is the driver will automatically align the Benro Polaris with the resolved coordinates whenever you perform a sync. The more plate solves that you perform, the greater accuracy you'll get with the Benro Polaris. This can help eliminate a few initial steps that we've all been doing with the Benro Polaris. You can now skip through the compass alignment, and you can skip through needing to use the Benro Polaris app's joysticks to find your first star and tweak it into the center of its reticle. The polar alignment with the Benro Polaris, it was pretty easy to begin with, but with plate solving, man, is it a lot easier. Now, one of Nina's best features is its automated target centering and alignment in its sequences. And you access that from Nina's sequencer tab under the target options. There's a couple of things that you can enable: slew to target and center target. Now, when both of these settings are enabled, Nina, it goes through the following sort of sequence. When it gets to a new target, it will slew the Polaris to those target coordinates. Then it will take an exposure and perform a plate solve to identify where the Polaris is actually pointing. It'll perform a sync to correct all of the applications upstream of the driver. And then the driver will push that sync through to the alignment of the Benro Polaris. And then, based on the results of the plate solve, it will attempt to slew closer to the target. And it's going to keep repeating this process until it's within tolerance. And then once the target's centered, Nina will continue its sequence, conducting an optional autofocus run and then taking your set of light images of the target. There's one other thing that we get a benefit from the plate solving. You, like me, probably noticed that the Benro Polaris has a habit of drifting off target. It's got a bit of a drift problem. And you can address this issue by simply pausing the sequence momentarily. What this does is when Nina starts the sequence again, it will perform a slew to target and center target operation. Now, Nina includes a 3-point polar alignment plugin that can optionally be installed. So if you want to conduct a 3-point polar alignment, you open up the panel, the 3-point polar alignment tool panel from the main imaging tab, and all you got to do is press the start button. What will happen first is Nina will take an exposure, plate solve, and then ask you to rotate the telescope 20 degrees around the right ascension axis. Now here's the little Easter egg. To do this, you navigate to the Equipment Mount tab, and if you enter a value of 1.2 into the primary rate field, and then you got to click the secondary rate field just to make sure it's entered, and then you click the W or E move buttons just once, the telescope will rotate around the RA axis by whatever you entered. So basically any decimal number between 1 and 2 will cause the driver to do a rotation around the RA axis rather than a normal move. Now once Nina has detected that it has moved that amount, it will take a second exposure, plate solve, and ask you to rotate another 20 degrees. So you do the same thing again, navigate to the Equipment Mount tab, click the W or E move buttons, and it will rotate again. Now once it's settled the third time, Nina will take its third exposure, plate solve, and calculate your polar alignment error. And then it goes into a state where Nina will continue taking images and plate solving those exposures, and it updates in real time the alignment error as you make adjustments to your mount. Now here's the painful part, is you can rotate your mount or adjust the leveling base, and the aim is to try and reduce the errors. And this can be very fiddly, but I've had success in improving the alignment with this process. But in my overall opinion, I think the benefit is not worth the pain. You know, your luck may vary. I think the new Alpaca N Point Alignment process is just, it's automatic, it's so much simpler and probably better than the 3-point alignment. And the reason we did it was we recognised that the Polaris is an Alt-As mount, it's not an equatorial mount. And while we initially implemented the sync function and the sync offset in RA deck coordinates, what we've done is we've added a second pointing model to the driver that allows the sync function to remember the offset in Alt-As coordinates instead of RA deck coordinates. And as it turns out, this offset is much more consistent between different plate solves, and it's our recommended pointing model for the driver. Now you don't really need to do anything extra to perform these endpoint alignments with the driver other than to enable the syncing with plate solving. Just performing multiple synced plate solves will automatically do endpoint alignment. Each new sync will be added to the driver's knowledge of how the Polaris was aligned at different orientations and times. What it does is it groups all of these results around the azimuth axis into 15-degree segments. And you can review the altitude of these offsets in the 15-degree segments to help you get an understanding of whether the Benro Polaris is within tolerance or whether it's slightly tilted one way or another. If it's not level, you can then fine-tune the leveling of the Benro Polaris to help reduce these offsets. Finally, this new alignment process simplifies the setup of the Benro Polaris. I'll walk through the new process. I'll switch on to the Astro mode, and then I'll quickly skip through the compass align and star align steps, because I'll do them later as soon as I do a plate solve. I'll connect up the Alpaca Driver and fire up Nina, and then I'll turn off the Benro Polaris app. Using Nina, I'll click the Park in the Equipment Mount tab, and this is equivalent to double tapping both of the Benro Polaris app joysticks. I'll pop my camera on top with its lens. I'll take the tripod outside and level it as accurately as I can with a spirit level. And then I'll perform a Nina autofocus run. And then I'll perform a manually initiated plate solve and sync. And as soon as the sync's complete, the Polaris is now aligned. So in summary, plate solving helps us in 3 ways. First, by speeding up our initial setup of the Benro Polaris. Second, by improving our target centering. And finally, by improving our polar alignment. I hope you agree that it's a game changer and worth the time to set it up. That's all I've got tonight. I'll see you again. Bye.